The legend of the Chernobyl mutants. Hey everyone, ever heard the whispers about the strange creatures roaming the shadows of Chernobyl? Today, we're diving deep into the legend of the Chernobyl mutants. Buckle up, it's gonna be a wild ride. The Chernobyl disaster, a brief history. So, let's rewind to April 26, 1986. On that fateful night, something went terribly wrong at reactor number 4 of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Due to a combination of a flawed reactor design and some critical operator errors, the reactor essentially went kaboom. The explosion wasn't just any explosion, it released a massive amount of radioactive material into the atmosphere. The nearby city of Pripyat, home to about 50,000 people, had no idea what had happened. The residents woke up to a beautiful Saturday morning, completely unaware of the invisible danger lurking in the air. But soon, the seriousness of the situation became clear. Authorities began evacuating the city, turning it into a ghost town overnight. They established a 30-kilometer exclusion zone around the plant, a no-go area that's still in place today. As if that wasn't enough, the radioactive cloud didn't stay put. It spread across Europe, sparking international concern and a massive response to contain the disaster. It was, and still is, one of the worst nuclear accidents in history. Radiation and its effects on living organisms. Alright, science time, let's chat about radiation for a sec. Radiation is basically energy traveling through space. When we talk about ionizing radiation, the kind released during nuclear accidents, it has enough energy to knock electrons off atoms. That's bad news for living tissues. The explosion released a cocktail of radioactive isotopes like iodine-131 and cesium-137. These sneaky particles can get into the air, water, and soil, making their way into plants and animals. Now, when radiation interacts with DNA, it can cause mutations. Mutations are changes to the genetic code. Sometimes they're harmless, sometimes not so much. There are two main types: somatic mutations, which affect the individual but aren't passed on, and germline mutations, which can be inherited by offspring. In the short term, high doses of radiation can cause acute radiation sickness. Think nausea, hair loss, and even death. In the long term, there's the potential for increased mutation rates, which brings us back to our topic. Could radiation have spawned mutants in Chernobyl? The birth of the mutant legends. In the aftermath of the disaster, stories began to circulate. The liquidators, those brave souls who worked on the cleanup, reported seeing bizarre things. Unusual animal sightings, strange behaviors, you name it. But here's the thing. This was during the Cold War. Tensions were high and mistrust was everywhere. The Soviet authorities weren't exactly forthcoming with information, fueling fear and speculation. In the absence of solid facts, myths and legends took root. The media played a big role, too. Sensational headlines sold papers, and the idea of mutated creatures lurking in the exclusion zone captured the public's imagination. Myths and alleged encounters. So, what kind of stories are we talking about? Well, there's the tale of the giant catfish in the cooling ponds. Supposedly, these fish grew to monstrous sizes due to the radiation. While it's true that some catfish in the area are pretty big, experts say it's more about lack of predators and plentiful food than mutations. Then there are reports of mutated wolves or other predators with strange abilities. Some say they've seen animals with multiple heads or glowing eyes. Sounds spooky, right? But when you look at the so-called photographic evidence, things get murky. Many images claiming to show mutated animals are either hoaxes or misinterpretations. In the age of the internet, misinformation spreads like wildfire. Scientific studies on Chernobyl's wildlife. Okay, time to get to the bottom of this. Scientists have been studying the plant and animal life in the exclusion zone for decades. What have they found? Well, some studies do show increased mutation rates in certain species. For example, there have been reports of birds with abnormalities or insects with genetic mutations. But here's the kicker. These mutations are often subtle, like albinism or reduced fertility. They're not turning animals into giant, monstrous versions of themselves. The majority of wildlife seems to be doing, surprisingly okay. In fact, some organisms have adapted to the radioactive environment. Researchers have found fungi that actually use radiation as a form of energy, pretty wild stuff. The resurgence of nature. One of the most fascinating aspects of Chernobyl is how nature has reclaimed the space. With humans out of the picture, wildlife has flourished. Species that were once rare in the region are now thriving. We're talking wolves, lynxes, bears, and even wild horses. The Przewalski horse, an endangered species, has made a remarkable comeback in the exclusion zone. It's like a real-life Jurassic Park, minus the dinosaurs and, the chaos theory. The absence of humans has allowed ecosystems to rebalance and evolve in unexpected ways. Debunking the myths. So, are there mutants in Chernobyl? Well, not in the way the legends suggest. From a scientific perspective, while radiation can cause mutations, the chances of it leading to monstrous creatures are slim to none. Most mutations are harmful to the organism and don't get passed on. The idea of radiation creating superpowered animals belongs more in comic books than reality. Experts studying the area agree that while there are genetic changes, they don't support the myth of the Chernobyl mutants. It's a classic case of science fiction taking over our imagination, cultural impact and media representations. But hey, that doesn't mean the legend isn't influential. Chernobyl has inspired tons of movies, video games, and books. Take the Stalker series or Metro 2033, both immerse players in a post-apocalyptic world filled with mutants and anomalies. These works play on our fears and fascination with the unknown. They amplify the myths, turning Chernobyl into a cultural icon of sorts. It's horror meets sci-fi, and we can't get enough. Artists and writers have also explored the disaster's impact, creating powerful pieces that reflect on humanity's relationship with technology and nature. The human toll. But let's not forget the real victims here, the people. The disaster had severe health effects on workers and residents. Many suffered from acute radiation sickness, and there have been increased rates of thyroid cancer, especially among children exposed to iodine 131. Personal stories from survivors are heart-wrenching. Families were uprooted, communities were torn apart, and the psychological effects linger to this day. The stigma and fear associated with radiation have had lasting impacts. Ethical and environmental considerations. Venturing into the exclusion zone isn't just a casual stroll in the park. There's an ongoing debate about the ethics of studying contaminated areas. Researchers have to balance the importance of scientific discovery with the risks to themselves and the environment. Some argue that the area should remain untouched, a living laboratory of sorts. Others believe we should resettle or at least manage parts of it. There's also the concern about the long-term effects of radioactive decay, which can last for thousands of years. Conclusion. So, to sum it all up, the legend of the Chernobyl mutants is more myth than reality. While radiation did and does have effects on living organisms, the idea of hulking, monstrous creatures roaming the exclusion zone isn't backed by science. What's truly remarkable is nature's resilience. Despite the harsh conditions, life finds a way. The resurgence of wildlife in the area is a testament to that. Chernobyl teaches us valuable lessons about the consequences of our actions and the importance of accurate information. It's a reminder to respect the power of nature and to tread carefully with the technologies we wield. Thanks for joining me on this journey. If you found this interesting, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more content, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious.